There are moments in our lives when the world feels unbearably heavy, when the silence of our own mind is louder than any noise outside, and when waking up in the morning feels less like a gift and more like a burden we're not sure we have the strength to carry. Depression doesn't just show up as sadness. Sometimes it's numbness, sometimes it's exhaustion, sometimes it's a quiet ache in the chest that whispers, "What's the point?" And in those moments, we begin to wonder if the version of us that once laughed easily, dreamed boldly, or loved deeply is gone forever. But here's the truth we don't talk about nearly enough. Depression does not mean you are broken. It doesn't mean you are weak or incapable or unworthy. Depression is not your identity. It is an experience, a season, a weight that rests on your shoulders but does not define your soul. And the courage it takes to simply exist in the midst of it is far greater than most people will ever recognize. Choosing to stay, choosing to breathe, choosing to show up in a world that sometimes feels dark and unforgiving, that is not weakness, that is the definition of strength. Too often we live in a culture that tells us to be positive, to smile through pain, to hustle our way out of despair as if sheer willpower alone can erase suffering. But the human heart doesn't work that way. Healing doesn't happen in tidy, linear steps. It happens in the messy middle, in the days when we feel like we're moving backwards, in the nights when tears soak our pillow without permission. It happens when we start to believe that even if we don't feel okay right now, there is still a part of us, no matter how quiet, that wants to fight for the possibility of joy. And I want you to know something that may sound simple, but could change the way you carry this weight. You are not alone. You are not the only one who has felt swallowed by their own thoughts, who has stared at the ceiling wondering if they could ever feel light again, who has whispered silently to themselves, "I can't keep doing this." And because you are not alone, you are not without hope. There are people who care. There are people who will sit in the darkness with you until the light feels possible again. And most importantly, there is a version of you, still inside you, waiting to rise again when the storm begins to clear. Overcoming depression is not about pretending to be happy. It's about learning to find meaning in the smallest of moments. It's about allowing yourself to be imperfectly human, about taking one more breath, one more step, one more chance at tomorrow. It's about courage, and courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet decision to get out of bed, to make a call, to speak your truth, to open your heart to someone else. This is not a journey of instant transformation. This is a journey of compassion for yourself, for your story, and for the tender parts of your soul that need care rather than judgment. And in this conversation, I want to remind you that your pain is real, but so is your resilience. Your struggle is heavy, but so is your capacity to rise. And even if you don't feel it yet, there is something beautiful waiting on the other side of the darkness. So today, as we talk about what it means to overcome depression, I want you to remember you are worthy of healing, you are worthy of love, and you are worthy of a life that feels like yours again. And it begins not with perfection, not with pressure, but with the smallest act of courage of staying. Staying for this moment, staying for this breath, staying for the possibility that tomorrow might look different than today. There are seasons in our lives when the weight we carry feels almost unbearable. When the idea of getting out of bed in the morning feels less like a beginning and more like a mountain that we simply don't have the strength to climb. When our chest feels heavy, not from exertion, but from a sadness that seems to wrap itself around every part of our being. And sometimes it isn't even sadness. Sometimes it's numbness, the absence of feeling. Sometimes it's that strange hollow space inside where even the things that once brought us joy feel flat, distant, or irrelevant. That, my friends, is depression. And I want to pause right here because even saying that word out loud is hard for many people. We don't like to talk about it. We brush it off with words like, "I'm just tired," or "I'll get through it," or "I just need to toughen up." But naming it, acknowledging it, calling it what it is, that's the first act of courage. Because depression isn't laziness, it isn't weakness. And it certainly isn't failure. Depression is an experience, not an identity. It is something you are living through, not something that defines who you are. Here's something I need you to hear: the fact that you're still here, that you are listening, breathing, existing in this moment. It already makes you strong, because the courage it takes to keep going when every part of you wants to stop is a kind of courage we rarely give ourselves credit for. We live in a world that teaches us to put on a mask, to smile through the pain, to hustle harder, to fake positivity until it magically becomes real. But let me ask you, how many times have you faked a smile while your heart was breaking? How many times have you said, "I'm fine," when what you really wanted to say was, "I'm drowning"? That is not weakness. That is survival. And survival itself is proof of your resilience. I remember speaking with someone who once described their depression like this: "It feels like I'm underwater. I can see people moving around above me. I can hear muffled sounds of laughter in life, but I can't reach it. And no matter how hard I try to swim, the surface always feels just out of reach." Have you ever felt that way? That sense of being cut off, like you're alive but not really living? That's the quiet cruelty of depression. It isolates you. It convinces you that you're the only one, that nobody else could possibly understand. But here's the truth. You are not alone. If there's one message I want to echo over and over, it's this: you are not alone. You are not the only one who has cried quietly into your pillow at night or stared at the ceiling wondering if tomorrow is even worth the effort. You are not the only one who has lost interest in the things you once loved, who has carried shame for feeling ungrateful, even when you know you have blessings in your life. Depression does not discriminate. It affects people across every culture, every profession, every level of success. Even the people who seem to have it all together can be fighting battles you cannot see. And because you are not alone, you are not without hope. Overcoming depression is not about snapping your fingers and deciding to be happy. If it were that simple, you would have done it already. It's not about forcing yourself to just think positive. Healing is much more nuanced, much more courageous. It's about learning to be gentle with yourself in the darkest moments. It's about honoring small victories, the days you got out of bed, the days you made a meal, the days you reached out to a friend, the days you chose to stay. Sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is decide to keep living in a world that doesn't make sense to you in that moment. And I want you to consider this, what if your worth was never measured by your productivity, your achievements, or the smile on your face? What if your worth simply existed because you exist? Depression tells us lies. It tells us we're not enough, that we're a burden, that we'll never get better. But lies lose their power when we start speaking truth over them. And the truth is, you are enough, you are loved, you are worthy of healing. Think of it this way: when a bone breaks, no one shames the body for being weak. No one says, why can't you just walk it off? We understand that it takes time to mend, that healing is a process. The mind is no different. Depression is not a personal flaw. It is not a lack of strength. It is an injury, a wound, a fracture of the spirit that deserves care, compassion, and attention. And just like any wound, it can heal. Slowly, yes. Enablingly, yes. But healing is possible. Some days will feel like progress, and others will feel like setbacks. That's part of the process. The goal isn't to avoid the darkness entirely. It's to learn that the darkness will not last forever, that it cannot extinguish the light that still lives inside you, even if right now that light feels like the faintest flicker. I know this is not easy to hear when you're in the middle of it. I know it feels impossible. But listen to me closely. Even when you cannot believe in yourself, there are people who will hold that belief for you until you can carry it again. There are people who will sit in the silence with you, who will remind you of your value, who will not demand that you be fixed before you are worthy of love. That kind of love exists. That kind of hope exists. And you deserve both. This conversation we're having, it's not about quick fixes or inspirational slogans. It's about honesty. It's about courage. It's about choosing over and over again to take one more breath, one more step, one more chance on tomorrow. And sometimes that's all we can do. And sometimes that's more than enough. So as we begin this journey together, I want you to hold on to this. Your pain is real, but so is your strength. Your struggle is heavy, but so is your capacity to rise. You don't need to have all the answers right now. You don't need to feel okay right now. You only need to stay. To stay here in this moment with the possibility that life can look different than it does today. Because even when depression tells you otherwise, there is still a future worth fighting for. There is still light ahead waiting for you, and you are worthy of reaching it